Hello and welcome to our channel, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Tonight we step into the fog-draped streets of Victorian London where the gas lamps flicker and the air hums with secrets. I am Dr. John H. Watson, and this is the tale of Blood on the Bridge to Baker Street, a mystery that tested even the formidable mind of Sherlock Holmes. Chapter 1. The Midnight Visitor. It was a chill evening in November 1888, the kind that drives one to seek the comfort of a roaring fire and a stout door against the creeping cold. The fog had descended upon London with a vengeance, wrapping Baker Street in a shroud so thick that the gas lamps outside our windows cast only feeble halos, their lights swallowed by the swirling gray. Within the cozy confines of 221B, the fire crackled merrily in the grate, casting dancing shadows across the cluttered room. Holmes lounged in his armchair, his long fingers idly tracing the neck of his violin, which lay across his knee. His mood, as was often the case when no case stimulated his restless mind, was one of languid melancholy. "Watson," he remarked, his voice low and tinged with ennui. "London is a city of infinite variety, yet its crimes grow predictable. I long for a problem worthy of my attention." I looked up from my copy of The Lancet, where I had been reading an article on the latest advances in surgical antiseptics. "Surely, Holmes," I replied. "The world cannot lack for mysteries. Even now, some soul in this vast city must be in need of your peculiar talents." No sooner had I spoken than a sharp, insistent rap echoed from the door below. Holmes's eyes gleamed with sudden interest, and he set aside his violin with a fluid motion. "Speak of the devil, Watson," he said, a faint smile curling his lips. "Mrs. Hudson has a visitor for us, unless I am much mistaken." Moments later, our estimable landlady appeared, her face a mixture of curiosity and mild indignation at the lateness of the hour. "A lady to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, her tone suggesting that such interruptions were not entirely welcome. "She insists it's urgent. A Mrs. Eleanor Grayson." "Show her in, Mrs. Hudson," Holmes said, rising with an energy that belied his earlier lethargy. "And pray bring us some tea. I suspect we shall be here some time." Mrs. Hudson departed, and soon the sound of hesitant footsteps ascended the stairs. The door opened to reveal a woman of middle years, her appearance striking yet marred by evident distress. Mrs. Eleanor Grayson was clad in the somber black of mourning, her dress of fine silk rustling softly as she entered. Her face, framed by a widow's veil, was pale, and her hands trembled as they clutched a small reticule. Yet there was a dignity in her bearing, a strength that spoke of resolve beneath her grief. "Mr. Holmes," she began, her voice quivering like a taut violin string, "I am in desperate need of your assistance. My brother, Sir Reginald Grayson, was found dead this morning on Westminster Bridge, murdered, they say, with a single stab to the heart." Holmes gestured to the armchair opposite his own. "Pray be seated, Mrs. Grayson, and tell us all. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem." His tone was gentle, yet there was an undercurrent of command that brooked no hesitation. Mrs. Grayson sank into the chair, her hands twisting the reticule as if it were an anchor in a storm. I took my place at the writing desk, ready to note the particulars, my medical curiosity piqued by the mention of a fatal wound. The firelight played upon her features, highlighting the lines of worry etched into her brow. "My brother," she continued, "was a member of Parliament, a man of influence and integrity. Last night he dined at his club, the Diogenes, and was seen leaving at 10 o'clock. He told me he had an appointment, but he would not say with whom. This morning a constable found his body beneath the arches of Westminster Bridge, cold and lifeless. The police say there is no weapon, no witnesses, and no clear motive. They are at a loss, Mr. Holmes, and I fear justice will elude us unless you intervene. Holmes leaned forward, his sharp gray eyes fixed upon her. Describe Sir Reginald's state of mind in the days prior to his death. Was he anxious, distracted, or otherwise altered? Mrs. Grayson hesitated, her gaze dropping to the locket she wore about her neck, which she opened to reveal a miniature portrait of a stern-faced man with mutton-chop whiskers. Reginald was troubled, she admitted. For weeks he had been preoccupied, often locking himself in his study. He spoke of a matter that weighed heavily upon him, something he could not share even with me. Yesterday he received a letter that seemed to agitate him further. He burned it in the fireplace, but I saw it bore no return address. A letter, you say? Holmes's voice was sharp with interest. Did you observe anything of its contents, or the hand that wrote it? She shook her head. Only that it was written in black ink on fine paper. Reginald read it quickly and thrust it into the flames. He said only, I must go to the bridge tonight. It cannot be avoided. Holmes steepled his fingers, his mind clearly racing. And what of his enemies? A man of Sir Reginald's position must have made some. Mrs. Grayson's lips tightened. There was our cousin, Mr. Julian Haverford, who contested Reginald's claim to our family estate. The matter was settled in Reginald's favor, but Julian was bitter. He swore Reginald would regret it. And then there was Lord Ashby, a political rival who opposed Reginald's reforms in Parliament. Their exchanges were heated. Interesting, Holmes murmured. And what of Sir Reginald's personal life? Any entanglements, debts, or secrets? None that I know of, she replied, though her hesitation suggested she was not entirely certain. Reginald was a private man devoted to his work. He had no wife, no children. His life was Parliament and the estate. Holmes rose and paced before the fire, his silhouette stark against the flickering glow. You have done well to come to me, Mrs. Grayson. The police, with their plodding methods, are ill-equipped for such a case. Watson, what say you to a midnight murder on Westminster Bridge? I set aside my pen, my pulse quickening at the prospect of a new adventure. A grim business, Holmes, but I am at your disposal. Then we shall visit the scene at first light, he declared. Mrs. Grayson, return home and rest. I shall call upon you tomorrow. Leave no detail unshared and trust that I shall bring clarity to this dark affair. Mrs. Grayson rose, her composure somewhat restored. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I have heard of your methods and I place my faith in them. She pressed the locket to her heart, a gesture of quiet resolve, and departed into the foggy night. As the door closed, Holmes turned to me, his eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. What do you make of it, Watson? A prominent man stabbed beneath a bridge with no weapon or witnesses, a cryptic letter burned in haste, a family feud and a political rival. The threads are many, but the pattern is yet to emerge. I considered the facts. The absence of a weapon is peculiar, I said. A single stab to the heart suggests precision, perhaps a professional hand. Yet the location, under a bridge in the dead of night, implies secrecy, not a random act. Precisely, Holmes said, resuming his seat and taking up his pipe. The heart is a target of intent, Watson. This was no robbery gone awry. Our killer had purpose, and the bridge was chosen for a reason. Tomorrow we shall see what secrets it holds. He fell silent, his pipe smoke curling toward the ceiling, mingling with the shadows. Outside, the fog pressed closer, muffling the clatter of a passing hansom cab and the distant toll of a church bell. I returned to my chair, the fire's warmth a comfort against the chill of the mystery that lay before us. As the clock struck midnight, I could not help but feel that we stood on the threshold of a case that would demand all of Holmes's genius. The blood on Westminster Bridge was but the first note in a symphony of secrets, and I, as ever, was eager to follow where my friend's deductions would lead. Chapter 2. The Scene on Westminster Bridge. The dawn broke over London with a reluctance matched only by the stubborn fog that clung to the city like a jealous lover. It was the morning following Mrs. Eleanor Grayson's visit to 221B Baker Street, and Sherlock Holmes was already in a state of restless energy as we prepared to investigate the scene of her brother's murder. The air in our lodgings was thick with the scent of pipe smoke and the faint aroma of Mrs. Hudson's strong tea, which I sipped gratefully as Holmes donned his greatcoat and deerstalker with the precision of a soldier arming for battle. "Watson," he said, his voice crisp with anticipation. "The bridge awaits us. There we shall find the first threads of this tangled skein. Bring your revolver. One never knows what shadows lurk in London's mists." I checked the Webley in my pocket, its weight a reassuring companion, and followed Holmes into the chill morning. The streets of Baker Street were shrouded in fog, the gas lamps casting ghostly halos that barely pierced the gloom. A hansom cab rattled past, its driver muffled in a scarf, and the distant cry of a newsboy hawking papers added a plaintive note to the city's awakening. We secured a cab and made for Westminster Bridge, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones a steady rhythm beneath our conversation. Holmes was silent for much of the journey, his sharp features set in contemplation. "The choice of Westminster Bridge is significant, Watson," he remarked at length. "It is a public place, yet secluded in its arches at night. A murder there suggests both audacity and calculation. We must look for what the police, in their haste, have overlooked." Our cab drew up near the bridge, its great stone arches looming through the fog like the ribs of some ancient beast. The Thames below flowed sluggishly, its waters a murky mirror reflecting the dim glow of gas lamps. The police had cordoned off the area where Sir Reginald Grayson's body had been found. A small knot of constables huddled beneath a tarpaulin, their breath visible in the cold air. A burly sergeant, his face reddened by the chill, recognized Holmes and waved us through with a grudging nod. "Mr. Holmes," he said, "Inspector Lestrade's been and gone. Said there's little to see here but blood and mud. Body's at the morgue now." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Lestrade's eyes see only what is obvious, Sergeant. Pray allow us to examine the scene undisturbed." We descended a narrow set of steps to the base of the bridge, where the cobblestones glistened with damp and the air carried the sour tang of river mud. The spot where Sir Reginald had been found was marked by a dark stain, now congealed and black against the gray stone. Holmes knelt beside it, his magnifying glass glinting as he studied the ground with the intensity of a scholar deciphering an ancient text. "Observe, Watson," he said, his voice low but vibrant with discovery. "The blood pattern is irregular, not the uniform pool one might expect from a body left undisturbed. See here, these streaks suggest the body was moved after the wound was inflicted, dragged perhaps a short distance." I crouched beside him, my medical training asserting itself. "A single stab to the heart," Mrs. Grayson said. "Death would have been swift, likely within moments. Why move the body at all?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. "To obscure the true location of the attack, or to conceal something else. Look here." He pointed to a faint smudge in the mud, a partial footprint too indistinct to identify with certainty. "The fog and tide have done their work, but this print suggests a man's boot well made with a slight wear on the heel, not a common laborer's tread." He rose and paced the area, his gaze sweeping the surroundings. Near the base of an arch, partially hidden by a pile of sodden leaves, he found a torn scrap of paper. Holding it to the light, he revealed the initials J.H. scrawled in a hurried hand. The ink smudged but legible. "J.H.?" I mused. Could it be Julian Haverford, the cousin Mrs. Grayson mentioned? He had a grievance against Sir Reginald. Holmes tucked the paper into his pocket, his expression unreadable. Possibly Watson, but initials are a flimsy thread. They may belong to our killer, a witness, or an innocent bystander. Or they may be a deliberate misdirection. We must not leap to conclusions. The river lapped softly against the stone, and a distant foghorn moaned, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Holmes continued his examination, noting the angle of the blood streaks and the position of nearby debris. The body was found face down, he said, yet the wound was to the chest. This suggests he was turned over, perhaps to ensure he was dead, or to search his person. I glanced at the dark water below. Could the weapon have been thrown into the Thames? A plausible hypothesis, Holmes replied, peering over the edge, but a blade small enough to deliver a precise stab would be difficult to find in these waters. No, Watson, our killer was careful. The absence of a weapon speaks to forethought. We climbed back to the bridge's surface where the fog was beginning to lift, revealing the silhouette of the Houses of Parliament in the distance. The scene was a stark contrast to the warmth of 221B, the cold stone, the relentless river, the faint hum of London's waking life. A vendor's cart trundled by, its owner calling out offers of hot chestnuts, and a pair of street urchins darted past, their laughter a fleeting note of levity. Holmes paused, his gaze fixed on a nearby lamp-post. "Watson, do you see that mark?" He pointed to a faint scratch in the iron, barely visible. A blade, perhaps, grazed it in passing. The height suggests a man of average stature, striking with force. I examined the mark, my mind racing. A struggle, then? Sir Reginald may have fought back. Possibly, Holmes said, but the single wound suggests efficiency. A struggle would leave more traces, torn clothing, scattered belongings. Sir Reginald's body, according to the police report, was remarkably intact save for the fatal wound. We lingered a moment longer, Holmes sketching the scene in his notebook with rapid, precise strokes. The bloodstain, the footprint, the scrap of paper, the scratch on the lamppost. All were catalogued with his meticulous care. As we prepared to leave, a constable approached, holding a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. "Found this just now, Mr. Holmes," he said. "Washed up on the bank not far from the body." Holmes unwrapped the cloth to reveal a silver cigarette case, engraved with the Grayson family crest. It was dented as if struck by a heavy blow and bore traces of dried blood. "Sir Reginald's?" I asked. "Undoubtedly," Holmes replied, turning it over in his hands. "The dent suggests it was in his pocket when he was struck, perhaps absorbing some of the blade's force. Yet it was found by the riverbank, not on his person. Curious." He pocketed the case, his expression thoughtful. "This, Watson, is a clue of significance. The killer may have removed it to obscure evidence, or it was dislodged during the movement of the body. Either way, it tells us the crime was not as tidy as our murderer intended." As we returned to our cab, the fog began to thin, revealing the city's spires and chimneys. The bridge, now bustling with early morning traffic, seemed an unlikely stage for murder, yet its shadows held secrets we were only beginning to unravel. Holmes leaned back in the cab, his eyes half closed, but I knew his mind was racing, piecing together the fragments of evidence with that extraordinary faculty of his. "Watson," he said at last, "this case is no common murder. The choice of Westminster Bridge, the missing weapon, the moved body, all point to a mind both cunning and desperate. We must learn more of Sir Reginald's last hours. His club, the Diogenes, will be our next stop. And we must speak again with Mrs. Grayson. That burned letter she mentioned may hold the key." I nodded, my thoughts still on the blood-stained cobblestones and the lonely cigarette case. "Do you suspect Haverford, Holmes? Or perhaps Lord Ashby, the political rival?" Holmes's smile was enigmatic. Suspect everyone, Watson, and trust no one until the facts align. The initials JH are a tantalizing clue, but they may be a red herring. Our task is to separate truth from deception in this fog of intrigue. The cab rattled on, carrying us back toward the heart of London. The mystery of Sir Reginald's death was deepening, and I felt the familiar thrill of the chase, tempered by the grim knowledge that a killer walked free in the city's shadows. Chapter 3. The Widow's Tale. The fog that had blanketed London at dawn lingered into the late morning, casting a pall over Baker Street as Sherlock Holmes and I returned to our lodgings from Westminster Bridge. The air in 221B was warm, scented with the familiar blend of pipe tobacco and the faint musk of old books, a comforting contrast to the chill dampness outside. The fire crackled in the grate, its glow illuminating the cluttered room, Holmes's chemical apparatus in one corner, my medical journals stacked haphazardly on the desk, and his violin resting on the mantelpiece, silent for now. Holmes shed his greatcoat and sank into his armchair, his fingers steepled as he stared into the flames. The silver cigarette case, dented and blood-stained, lay on the table beside him, alongside the torn scrap of paper bearing the initials JH. Both had been carefully wrapped in a cloth to preserve their secrets. I took my own seat, my mind still turning over the grim scene beneath the bridge, the irregular blood pattern, the smudged footprint, the scratched lamppost. "Watson," Holmes said, breaking the silence, "we have gathered fragments, but the picture remains incomplete. Mrs. Grayson must provide the next piece. Her brother's final hours hold the key, and that burned letter she mentioned intrigues me. We shall call upon her at once." I nodded, fetching my hat and coat. She seemed reluctant to speak fully last night. Grief, perhaps, or fear of revealing too much. Holmes's eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity that signaled his mind was fully engaged. Grief, yes, but there is more. Her hesitation betrays a knowledge she may not yet realize she possesses. Come, Watson, let us waste no time. Mrs. Hudson, ever attentive, had prepared a tray of tea and biscuits, which she set before us as we awaited Mrs. Grayson's arrival. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, its rhythm a counterpoint to the soft patter of rain against the windows. Soon a knock announced our visitor, and Mrs. Grayson entered, her mourning dress as somber as the night before, though her composure seemed slightly steadier. Her hands, however, still clutched the locket with her brother's portrait, as if it were a talisman against her sorrow. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she greeted, her voice soft but resolute. "I trust you found something at the bridge." Holmes gestured to the chair opposite his own. "We have begun to unravel the threads, Mrs. Grayson, but your assistance is vital. Pray, take tea and tell us more of Sir Reginald's life, his habits, his fears, and especially that letter you mentioned." She accepted a cup, though it remained untouched as she gathered her thoughts. The firelight cast flickering shadows across her face, highlighting the strain in her eyes. "Reginald was a man of duty," she began. "As a member of Parliament, he was tireless in his work for reform, particularly in matters of trade and labor. He was respected, even loved by many, but his resolve made enemies. His dispute with our cousin, Julian Haverford, was no secret. The family estate, Grayson Hall, was contested after our father's death. Reginald inherited as the eldest, but Julian claimed the will was forged. The courts ruled in Reginald's favor, but Julian never forgave him." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "This Julian Haverford, describe him, his character, his circumstances." Mrs. Grayson's lips tightened. "Julian is younger than Reginald, perhaps 35, with a temperament both charming and volatile. He is a gentleman of leisure, living off a modest inheritance, but he has a taste for extravagance, gambling, fine wines, and the company of questionable associates. He resented Reginald's success, calling it unearned. Their last meeting a month ago ended in a shouting match. Julian vowed that Reginald would pay for his greed. I jotted notes, my pen scratching softly. A strong motive for murder, I remarked, and the initials JH we found at the scene could point to him. Holmes held up a hand. We shall come to that, Watson. Mrs. Grayson, you mentioned a letter that agitated your brother. Tell us more. She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the locket. It arrived yesterday morning, delivered by hand. I saw it only briefly before Reginald burned it. The paper was fine, almost creamy, and the writing was in black ink, bold and hurried. He read it, grew pale, and said, I must go to the bridge tonight. It cannot be avoided. I begged him to tell me more, but he refused, saying it was for my safety. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Did you see any mark on the paper? A seal? A watermark? Anything distinctive? She frowned, her brow furrowing in thought. There was, yes, a faint watermark. I caught a glimpse as he held it to the light. A lion's head, I think, with a crown above it. Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his expression unreadable but alert. A lion's head, he murmured. A clue of some import. Such stationery is not common, used by a select few. Perhaps a government office or a private firm of high standing. And what of Sir Reginald's demeanor in the days prior? You said he was troubled. Mrs. Grayson's voice grew softer, as if the weight of memory pressed upon her. For weeks he was not himself. He spent hours in his study poring over papers, locking the door even to me. He received visitors at odd hours, men I did not know, some in fine coats, others rougher, like dock workers. Once I overheard him arguing with a man whose voice was low and menacing. Reginald said something about no more payments. I assumed it was a political matter, but now I wonder. Holmes leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. Payments, you say? Did he keep a ledger? A record of his finances? There was one, she replied. He kept it in his study, hidden in a locked drawer. I saw him consult it often, but he never let me see its contents. Curious, Holmes said. And these visitors, can you describe any of them? One stood out, she said. A tall man, thin, with a dark cloak and a scar across his left cheek. He came twice, always at night. Reginald seemed uneasy in his presence, and after his visits, my brother was particularly withdrawn. I glanced at Holmes, noting the spark in his eyes. A scar, I said. Distinctive. Could he be connected to the murder? Possibly, Holmes replied, but we must not assume. Mrs. Grayson, what of Lord Ashby, the political rival you mentioned? Were his disputes with your brother merely professional? Her expression darkened. Lord Ashby opposed Reginald's reforms at every turn. He is ambitious, a man who craves power. Their debates in Parliament were fierce, and I heard rumors that Ashby spread slanders about Reginald, questioning his integrity. Once at a social gathering, Ashby implied that Reginald's wealth came from unsavory sources. Reginald was furious but dismissed it as jealousy. Holmes nodded, his mind clearly cataloging every detail. And your brother's personal life? Any entanglements, debts, or secrets that might shed light? Mrs. Grayson's hesitation was palpable. Reginald was a private man. He had no wife, no close companions beyond his political allies, but there was a rumor years ago of a scandal, a young woman, a governess in our household. It was hushed up and she left suddenly. Reginald never spoke of it, but I sensed it weighed on him. A scandal, Holmes mused. Even old secrets can cast long shadows. Mrs. Grayson, you have been most helpful. I shall visit Sir Reginald's study to examine this ledger and any other papers. In the meantime, remain vigilant. Speak to no one of our inquiries. She nodded, her face pale but resolute. I trust you, Mr. Holmes. Please find who did this to my brother." As she rose to leave, Holmes handed her a card with our address. "Should you recall anything further, send word at once." The door closed behind her and the room fell silent save for the ticking clock and the soft patter of rain. Holmes took up the cigarette case, turning it over in his hands. "A lion's head watermark, Watson. A scarred man. A hidden ledger. The threads multiply, but the pattern begins to form." I set down my pen, my mind racing. The ledger could reveal blackmail or bribery. And the scarred man, perhaps a hired thug. Holmes's smile was faint but sharp. "You leap ahead, Watson, but your instincts are sound. The letter's watermark suggests a connection to wealth or power, possibly linking to Lord Ashby or another figure in Sir Reginald's orbit. The scarred man may be our killer, or a pawn in a larger game. We must tread carefully, for this case is steeped in misdirection." He rose and moved to the window, peering into the fog. "To the Diogenes Club next, Watson. Sir Reginald's last hours there may reveal his mysterious appointment, and we must locate that ledger. It may hold the motive for his death." I felt the familiar thrill of the chase, tempered by the weight of Mrs. Grayson's grief. The fire crackled, casting its warm glow, but outside the fog seemed to whisper of secrets yet to be uncovered. Chapter 4. Clues in the cobblestones. The fog that had smothered London all morning began to lift by noon, revealing a city bustling with life yet shadowed by the secrets we had begun to uncover. After Mrs. Grayson's departure from 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes was a whirlwind of purpose, his mind alight with the clues we had gathered. The blood-stained cigarette case, the scrap of paper with the initials J.H., the mysterious letter with a lion's head watermark, and the troubling hints of Sir Reginald Grayson's hidden troubles. The warmth of our lodgings, with its crackling fire and familiar clutter, felt like a brief respite before we plunged back into the heart of the mystery. "Watson," Holmes declared, shrugging into his greatcoat, "we must follow the trail while it is fresh. To the Diogenes Club, where Sir Reginald spent his final hours, then perhaps to the British Museum to trace that watermark. The cobblestones of London hold more secrets than the police suspect, and we shall unearth them." I grabbed my coat and hat, my pulse quickening at the prospect of action. "The Diogenes Club," I said, "a place of silence and secrets. Do you think the porter there saw something significant?" Holmes's eyes glinted. "Porters see more than they say, Watson. A man like Sir Reginald leaving in agitation would not go unnoticed. Come, the game is afoot." We hailed a hansom cab, its wheels clattering over the damp cobblestones as we made our way through the crowded streets of London. The air was sharp with the scent of coal smoke and wet wool, and the cries of street vendors mingled with the clop of horses' hooves. The Diogenes Club, that bastion of solitude where conversation was forbidden, loomed in Pall Mall, its austere facade a fitting backdrop for our inquiry. As we entered, the porter, a stout man with a grizzled beard named Mr. Baxter, greeted us with a nod. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Holmes, whose reputation evidently preceded him. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice hushed as befitted the club's rules. "I assume you're here about poor Sir Reginald?" "Precisely," Holmes replied, his tone low but commanding. "Tell me of his last visit, every detail, however trivial." Baxter led us to a quiet alcove where the rustle of newspapers and the soft tread of footsteps were the only sounds. "Sir Reginald arrived at 7 last night," he began. "He dined alone as was his custom, but he seemed out of sorts, fidgety, checking his watch often. At 10 he left in a hurry, accompanied by a man in a dark cloak. I didn't see the fellow's face, but he was tall, thin, and moved with a certain menace, if you'll pardon the word." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. This man, any distinguishing features? A scar, perhaps, or a peculiarity of dress? Baxter frowned, scratching his beard. Now you mention it, I did catch a glimpse of his face as they passed under the gaslight. There was a scar, yes, across his left cheek. He kept his hat low, but it was unmistakable. Sir Reginald seemed uneasy with him, almost as if he were compelled to go. I exchanged a glance with Holmes, recalling Mrs. Grayson's mention of a scarred man visiting her brother. Did they speak? I asked. Not much, Baxter replied. Sir Reginald said something like, "It must be tonight, then," and the other man only nodded. They took a cab toward Westminster, I think. Holmes nodded, his mind clearly cataloguing the information. And Sir Reginald's demeanor in the days prior? Did he receive any visitors here or letters? A few letters came for him, Baxter said. One yesterday morning, hand-delivered. Fine paper, no seal. He read it and grew pale, then tucked it into his pocket. That was the last I saw of him before the news this morning. Holmes thanked the porter and led me back to the street, where the afternoon sun struggled to pierce the lingering mist. The scarred man again, he mused. A recurring figure in this drama. And that letter? Likely the same one Mrs. Grayson saw him burn. We must trace its origin, Watson. To the British Museum. The journey to Bloomsbury was swift, the streets alive with the clatter of carts and the shouts of costermongers. The British Museum's grand portico rose before us, its stone steps worn by countless scholars. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of old leather and dust, and the hushed murmur of study filled the reading room. Holmes, with his usual authority, secured access to a collection of stationery samples, his goal to identify the lion's head watermark described by Mrs. Grayson. We were led to a quiet corner where a librarian produced a folio of paper samples, their edges yellowed with age. Holmes examined each with his magnifying glass, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. Here, he said at last, holding up a sheet. A lion's head with a crown, used by a select few firms in London. This particular design is exclusive to Messrs. Harrington & Sons, a stationer catering to government offices and wealthy clients. Their records will tell us who purchased such paper in recent months. I marveled at his method, and if we find the buyer, we may find the author of the letter. Indeed, Holmes replied, tucking the sample into his pocket. But there is more, Watson. Harrington & Sons supply stationery to several prominent figures, including one Mr. Julian Haverford, our embittered cousin. His name surfaces again, and with it the initials J.H. I frowned, my mind grappling with the implications. Haverford seems too obvious a suspect, Holmes. A man so openly hostile would hardly leave such blatant clues. Holmes's smile was faint but sharp. You begin to think like a detective, Watson. The obvious is often a trap. Haverford may be involved, but I suspect a deeper game. The scarred man, the letter, the cigarette case, all suggest a conspiracy beyond a simple family feud. As we left the museum, the sky had darkened, and a fine rain began to fall, slicking the cobblestones and casting a sheen over the gas lamps. Holmes paused beneath one, his face illuminated by its flickering glow. Consider the cigarette case, Watson. Dented, blood-stained, found by the riverbank. It was not on Sir Reginald's body, which suggests it was removed. Perhaps to conceal evidence or because it held something of value. Such as? I asked, pulling my coat tighter against the damp. A note, perhaps, or a key, Holmes said. Or it may simply have been dislodged in a struggle. But its presence by the riverbank away from the body indicates the killer's haste or carelessness. We must examine Sir Reginald's study next, for that ledger Mrs. Grayson mentioned may reveal what he was hiding. We hailed another cab, the rain pattering on its roof as we made our way back toward Baker Street. Holmes was silent, his gaze fixed on the passing streets where the silhouettes of pedestrians moved like specters in the mist. I ventured a question. Do you think Lord Ashby, the political rival, could be behind this? His enmity with Sir Reginald was well known. Holmes's eyes flicked to me. Ashby is a possibility, Watson, but his methods are those of the drawing room, not the dagger. A man of his ambition would prefer slander to murder unless driven to desperation. No, the scarred man intrigues me more. He is the shadow in this affair, the hand that struck the blow or served another's will. The cab rattled on, and I felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The Diogenes Club had confirmed the scarred man's presence, and the museum had linked the letter to a stationer used by Julian Haverford. Yet Holmes's caution about jumping to conclusions echoed in my mind. The initials J.H. could indeed be a red herring, planted to mislead us. As we neared Baker Street, Holmes spoke again. Tomorrow we visit Sir Reginald's home. The ledger, if it exists, will reveal his secrets, debts, blackmail, or worse, and we must learn more of this scarred man. He is no phantom, Watson, but a flesh-and-blood figure who holds a key to this puzzle. The rain had eased by the time we reached 221B, and the familiar glow of our windows beckoned like a beacon. Inside, Mrs. Hudson greeted us with a fresh pot of tea, and I warmed my hands by the fire, the chill of the day lingering in my bones. Holmes, however, was undeterred, already at his desk, sketching the layout of Westminster Bridge and noting the clues we had gathered. "Watson," he said without looking up, "this case is a tapestry of deception. The cobblestones of London have whispered their secrets to us today, but we must listen carefully. The scarred man, the letter, the cigarette case, all are threads that will lead us to the truth, if we do not falter." I nodded, my thoughts a whirl of bloodstains and shadows. The mystery of Sir Reginald's death was growing ever more complex, and I knew that only Holmes's relentless logic could unravel it. As the fire crackled and the rain resumed its soft patter outside, I felt the familiar thrill of the chase, tempered by the knowledge that a killer still walked free in London's fog. Chapter 5. The Shadow of the Thames. The afternoon had waned into a damp, chilly evening as Sherlock Holmes and I pursued the threads of Sir Reginald Grayson's murder. The discoveries at the Diogenes Club and the British Museum had deepened the mystery. The scarred man who accompanied Sir Reginald to his fateful rendezvous, the lion's head watermark linking the cryptic letter to Julian Haverford, and the blood-stained cigarette case found by the riverbank all pointed to a conspiracy woven with care and malice. Back at 221B Baker Street, the fire's warmth had done little to dispel the chill of the case, and Holmes's restless energy propelled us back into London's fog-laden streets. "Watson," Holmes said, as he donned a rough tweed coat and a cloth cap, transforming himself into a figure who might blend with the dockside crowds. "We must follow the trail of the scarred man. The porter's description suggests a connection to London's underbelly, where secrets are traded as freely as gin. We shall seek him by the Thames, where men of his ilk often lurk." I adjusted my own attire, a plain overcoat and a scarf to obscure my face, checking the reassuring weight of my revolver in my pocket. "The docks are a rough place, Holmes," I said. "If this man is involved, he may not take kindly to our inquiries." Holmes's smile was sharp. "All the better, Watson. A cornered rat reveals much by its desperation. To the Black Anchor Tavern near Wapping. I have it on good authority that it is a haunt for those who traffic in shadows." We hailed a hansom cab, its wheels splashing through puddles as we descended toward the Thames. The fog had thickened again, wrapping the city in a gray veil that muffled the clatter of hooves and the cries of street vendors. The air grew heavy with the scent of tar and fish, and the distant moan of a foghorn underscored the river's restless presence. As we neared Wapping, the streets narrowed, their cobblestones slick with grime and the refuse of the docks. Gas lamps flickered feebly, casting long shadows that danced like specters. The Black Anchor Tavern was a squat, weathered building nestled among warehouses, its windows glowing with a sickly yellow light. The sign above the door, a faded anchor entwined with rope, creaked in the damp breeze. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sour tang of spilled ale. Rough voices mingled with the clink of glasses, and the patrons, dock workers, sailors, and shadier figures, cast wary glances as we entered. Holmes, with his uncanny ability to blend into any setting, adopted the slouch of a laborer, while I kept close, my hand near my revolver. We took a table in a shadowed corner, ordering 2 pints to maintain our guise. Holmes's eyes scanned the room, sharp and unyielding beneath the brim of his cap. "Observe, Watson," he murmured, "the man by the bar with the red scarf. His posture is too alert for a common drunkard. He watches the door as if expecting trouble. Or someone." I followed his gaze to a wiry figure, his face half hidden by a scarf, his fingers drumming nervously on the bar. "Could he be our scarred man?" I whispered. "Possibly," Holmes replied, "but we must be certain. Patience, Watson. The Thames has a way of drawing its secrets to the surface." As we waited, a burly dock worker approached the man with the red scarf, their conversation low and heated. The dock worker slipped him a folded paper which the man tucked into his coat before slipping out a side door. Holmes was on his feet in an instant, his movements fluid and silent. "Follow, Watson, but keep your distance. He may lead us to our quarry." We trailed the man through the labyrinthine alleys of Wapping, the fog swallowing the sound of our footsteps. The Thames lapped nearby, its dark waters gleaming under the occasional gas lamp. The man moved quickly, glancing over his shoulder, but Holmes's skill in pursuit kept us unseen. At last he entered a derelict warehouse, its windows boarded and its door hanging ajar. Holmes signaled for caution, and we crept closer, the creak of rotting wood mingling with the river's murmur. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows, lit only by a single lantern swinging from a beam. The man with the red scarf stood speaking to another figure, tall, thin, with a dark cloak and a scar slashing across his left cheek. My heart quickened. This was surely the man described by the porter and Mrs. Grayson. Holmes's hand on my arm steadied me, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of discovery. "Listen," he whispered, as we crouched behind a stack of crates. The scarred man's voice was low and gravelly. "Crane's getting nervous, Haverford. Says the job on the bridge was too public. If Holmes is sniffing around, we're done for." "Haverford, Julian Haverford," the cousin replied, his tone sharp with impatience. "Crane's a fool. The letter was burned, the case was ditched. No one saw us. Keep your nerve, Silas, and we'll be clear." I glanced at Holmes, whose expression was one of intense concentration. Silas Crane, then, was the scarred man's name, and Haverford's involvement was confirmed. But what was their job, and why the fear of Holmes's pursuit? Holmes leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "Crane is a smuggler, Watson, known in these parts for moving goods and information across the Thames. Haverford's presence here suggests blackmail or worse. We must learn their game." Before we could act, a third figure emerged from the shadows, a burly man with a sailor's gait, his face obscured by a cap. He spoke in a harsh whisper. "Ashby's getting impatient, Haverford. Wants to know if the ledger's deed secure. If Grayson's sister finds it, we're all in the dock." Haverford cursed softly. "The ledger's hidden where no one will look. Tell Ashby to keep his mouth shut and his payment's coming. Crane, you handle the sister if she gets too curious." Holmes's grip tightened on my arm, his eyes blazing. "Lord Ashby," he mouthed, confirming the political rival's involvement. The ledger, mentioned again, was clearly central to the plot. But before we could hear more, a crate shifted, its creak echoing in the silence. The three men froze, their heads turning toward our hiding place. "Run, Watson!" Holmes hissed, pulling me toward the door. We bolted into the alley, the sound of pursuit close behind. The fog was our ally, cloaking us as we wove through the maze of Wapping's back streets. My heart pounded, the revolver heavy in my hand. But Holmes's calm precision guided us to safety. We ducked into a doorway, the sound of footsteps fading as our pursuers lost the trail. Breathing heavily, I leaned against the damp wall. "Haverford, Crane, and Ashby," I said. "A conspiracy, Holmes. Blackmail, perhaps. Over that ledger." Holmes nodded, his face grim. "Crane is the muscle, Haverford the schemer, and Ashby the mastermind, or so it appears. The ledger likely contains evidence of Sir Reginald's payments, possibly to cover a scandal or to buy silence. But we need proof, Watson. Tomorrow we search Sir Reginald's study. The ledger is the key." We made our way back to the main road where a hansom cab awaited. The fog had thickened, the gas lamps mere pinpricks of light. As we rode back to Baker Street, I pondered the web we had uncovered. Haverford's bitterness, Crane's menace, and Ashby's ambition formed a dangerous triad. But the initials J.H. and the cigarette case still nagged at my mind. Were they deliberate clues or misdirection? Back at 221B, the fire's warmth was a balm against the night's chill. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling toward the ceiling as he paced. "Crane is a known quantity, Watson. A smuggler with a reputation for violence. Haverford's involvement suggests a personal grudge, but Ashby's role hints at a larger motive. Political, perhaps, or financial. The ledger will tell us." I set down my notebook, the day's events swirling in my mind. "And Mrs. Grayson?" "They spoke of handling her if she gets curious. She may be in danger." Holmes's expression darkened. "Indeed, we must warn her discreetly, but first, the ledger. It holds the secret of Sir Reginald's death and the motive for this conspiracy." As the fire crackled and the fog pressed against the windows, I felt the weight of the case settle over me. The shadow of the Thames had revealed its players, but the game was far from over. Holmes's relentless logic would guide us, but the danger was closer than ever. Chapter 6. A Game of Misdirection. The morning after our perilous encounter at the Black, Anchor Tavern, London, awoke under a veil of fog that seemed to mirror the tangled web of deceit surrounding Sir Reginald Grayson's murder. The revelations in Wapping, Julian Haverford's collusion with the scarred smuggler Silas Crane, and their mention of Lord Ashby and a hidden ledger, had set Sherlock Holmes's mind ablaze with purpose. Back at 221B Baker Street, the fire crackled in the grate, casting a warm glow over the familiar clutter of books, chemical vials, and Holmes's violin. But the coziness of our lodgings could not dispel the chill of the case's growing complexity. Holmes stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the foggy pane, his pipe sending curls of smoke toward the ceiling. "Watson," he said, his voice low and thoughtful, "we are deep in a game of misdirection. The initials J.H., the cigarette case, the letter with the lion's head watermark, all may be lures to divert us from the truth. Our next move must be precise. We shall visit Hyde Park, where a clue awaits, and then Sir Reginald's study for that ledger." I looked up from my notes, puzzled. Hyde Park, what clue could be there? Holmes's eyes glinted with that peculiar intensity that signaled a breakthrough. The porter at the Diogenes Club mentioned Sir Reginald's habit of walking through the park after his dinners. If he met someone there before heading to Westminster Bridge, we may find evidence the police overlooked. The park's paths are less trodden in this weather, preserving what the riverbank could not. I donned my coat, ensuring my revolver was secure, and followed Holmes into the damp streets. The fog was lighter today, but the air remained heavy with the scent of coal smoke and wet leaves. A hansom cab carried us to Hyde Park, where the skeletal trees stood sentinel over paths slick with fallen leaves. The distant clatter of hooves and the soft cooing of pigeons were the only sounds, save for the rustle of our footsteps on the gravel. Holmes led us to a secluded path near the Serpentine, where gas lamps cast feeble pools of light. "Here," he said, his gaze sweeping the ground. "Sir Reginald's route from the club to Westminster would likely pass this way. Look for anything out of place. A dropped item, a mark, a sign of struggle." We walked slowly, Holmes's magnifying glass in hand, his eyes scanning every inch of the path. Near a weathered bench, partially hidden by a pile of leaves, he paused. "Watson, observe this." He brushed aside the leaves to reveal a glove, its fine leather monogrammed with the initials J.H. in gold thread. The glove was stained with mud, but its quality suggested a gentleman's hand. "Julian Haverford again," I said, my mind racing. "This cannot be coincidence." Holmes held the glove to the light, his expression skeptical. "Too convenient, Watson. A glove so clearly marked left where we might find it? This is no accident. It is a breadcrumb meant to lead us astray." He examined the stitching, his magnifying glass catching the faint gleam of a loose thread. "This was made by a tailor in Savile Row, Messrs. Poole and Cohen's to be precise. Their work is distinctive, and I know of one client who favors their gloves, Lord Ashby." I frowned, the web of suspects tightening. "Ashby? So the glove is his, marked with Haverford's initials to implicate him?" "Precisely," Holmes said, pocketing the glove. "A clever ruse, but it betrays the hand behind it. Ashby or someone in his employ seeks to shift suspicion to Haverford. The initials J.H. at the bridge were likely planted for the same purpose. We are being played, Watson, but the game is not yet won." The park was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and the distant toll of a church bell. Holmes continued his search, finding a faint scuff mark on the bench's armrest, as if someone had leaned heavily or struggled there. "Sir Reginald may have paused here," he mused, "perhaps to meet his killer, or to receive that fateful letter. But the glove is the key. It tells us our adversary is cunning and anticipates our moves." We returned to Baker Street, the glove joining the growing collection of clues on Holmes's desk. The fire's warmth was a welcome contrast to the park's chill, and Mrs. Hudson brought a tray of tea and scones, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm of our investigation. Holmes sat at his desk, examining the glove alongside the cigarette case and the scrap of paper with J.H. scrawled upon it. "The glove's stitching is recent," he said, his magnifying glass poised. "Poole and Comer keep meticulous records. A visit to their shop will confirm Ashby's connection, but I suspect he is too clever to be directly implicated. The ledger, Watson, we must find it. It holds the truth behind Sir Reginald's death." I sipped my tea, my mind grappling with the layers of deception. "Haverford, Crane, Ashby," I said. "Each seems guilty, yet the clues point in circles. Could they all be involved?" Holmes's smile was faint but sharp. "A conspiracy is likely, but its shape is unclear. Haverford's grudge, Crane's violence, Ashby's ambition, all are motives, but the ledger will reveal the thread that binds them. Sir Reginald's payments mentioned by Mrs. Grayson and overheard in Wapping suggest blackmail. The question is, who held the whip?" We set out again, this time to Sir Reginald's townhouse in Belgravia, a grand residence of white stone and tall windows. Mrs. Grayson met us at the door, her face pale but composed, the locket still clutched in her hand. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, ushering us inside. "Have you found something?" "We are close," Holmes replied, his tone reassuring yet guarded. "We must see your brother's study. The ledger you mentioned may hold the key." The study was a handsome room, its walls lined with books and a heavy oak, desk dominating the center. The air smelled of leather and ink, and a faint trace of cigar smoke lingered, a reminder of Sir Reginald's presence. Holmes moved with purpose, his eyes scanning every surface. "The locked drawer," he said, turning to Mrs. Grayson. "Where is it?" She pointed to the desk's lower right side where a small brass keyhole gleamed. "Reginald kept the key on his person," she said. "It was not found with his body." Holmes produced a small set of lockpicks, his fingers deft as he worked the mechanism. "A minor obstacle," he murmured. With a soft click, the drawer opened, revealing a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with neat rows of figures and cryptic notations. Holmes leafed through it, his brow furrowed. "Payments," he said, "to an account marked only as SC. Silas Crane, perhaps. Thousands of pounds over the past year, increasing in frequency. And here a note, for silence on the matter of 65. I leaned closer, my medical curiosity piqued. "The scandal Mrs. Grayson mentioned, the governess from 1865? "Likely," Holmes said. "A scandal buried but not forgotten. Sir Reginald paid to keep it hidden, but someone, Crane, Haverford, or Ashby, exploited it. This ledger is the motive for his murder." Mrs. Grayson gasped, her hand flying to her locket. Reginald was blackmailed? But why kill him if he was paying? Holmes's eyes darkened. "Because he stopped, Mrs. Grayson. The payments ceased 3 weeks ago. He refused to continue, and that refusal cost him his life." We left the study, the ledger safely tucked in Holmes's coat. As we stepped into the foggy street, a sense of unease settled over me. The glove, the initials, the ledger, all were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was obscured by deliberate misdirection. "Holmes," I said, "if Ashby planted the glove, is he the mastermind?" Holmes's expression was grim. "Ashby has the cunning, but Crane's violence and Haverford's grudge cannot be discounted. The glove is a feint meant to throw us off the scent. We must proceed with caution, Watson, for our adversaries are watching." Back at 221B, Holmes spread the clues on his desk, the fire casting long shadows. "The game of misdirection is clear," he said. "The initials J.H. and the glove point to Haverford, but Ashby's tailor suggests a deeper plot. The ledger confirms blackmail, but the scandal of 65 remains a shadow. We must learn more of this governess and her fate." I nodded, the weight of the case pressing upon me. "And Mrs. Grayson?" "She's in danger if they suspect she knows of the ledger." Holmes's pipe glowed as he exhaled a plume of smoke. "Indeed. We shall warn her discreetly and set a trap for our foes. The truth lies just beyond our grasp, Watson, but we shall seize it." The fog outside thickened, muffling the sounds of London, but within 221B the fire burned bright, a beacon against the darkness of the mystery. The game was afoot, and Holmes's relentless logic would guide us through the maze of deceit. Chapter 7. The Hidden Motive. The late afternoon light filtered weakly through the fog as Sherlock Holmes and I returned to 221B Baker Street, the ledger from Sir Reginald Grayson's study tucked securely in Holmes's coat. The discoveries of the day, the monogrammed glove in Hyde Park, the ledger's cryptic entries, and the overheard plotting of Julian Haverford, Silas Crane, and Lord Ashby, had tightened the web of intrigue surrounding Sir Reginald's murder. The cozy warmth of our lodgings, with its crackling fire and the faint scent of Mrs. Hudson's baking, offered a brief respite. But the weight of the case pressed heavily upon us. Holmes spread the ledger on his desk, its leather cover worn from frequent handling. The firelight cast dancing shadows across the pages, illuminating rows of figures and the ominous note, "For silence on the matter of 65. I settled into my armchair, my notebook open, as Holmes began to pore over the entries with his magnifying glass. "Watson," he said, his voice low and intense, "this ledger is the heart of the matter. Sir Reginald's payments to SC, Likely Silas Crane. Total thousands of pounds over the past year, escalating in frequency until 3 weeks ago when they abruptly ceased. This matter of 65 is the key. A scandal, Mrs. Grayson said, involving a governess. We must uncover its nature. I frowned, my medical mind grappling with the implications. Blackmail, then. Sir Reginald paid to keep this scandal hidden, but when he stopped, it cost him his life. Could the governess herself be involved? Holmes's eyes gleamed. An astute question, Watson, but unlikely. A governess from 1865 would be middle-aged now and her influence limited. No, the scandal is a weapon wielded by another, Crane, Haverford, or Ashby. We must search Sir Reginald's study further for any record of this governess, and we must protect Mrs. Grayson, for her knowledge of the ledger makes her a target. We resolved to return to Sir Reginald's Belgravia townhouse, where Mrs. Grayson awaited news of our progress. The streets of London were alive with the clatter of hansom cabs and the cries of vendors, but the fog lent an air of secrecy, as if the city itself conspired to hide the truth. The Grayson residence, with its white stone facade and tall windows, stood imposing against the gray dusk, its gas lamps flickering like sentinels. Mrs. Grayson greeted us at the door, her face pale but resolute, the locket with her brother's portrait still clutched in her hand. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Have you found the killer?" "Not yet," Holmes replied, his tone gentle but firm. "But the ledger has revealed much. We need to search your brother's study again for any documents related to a governess from 1865, and you must be cautious. There are those who may see you as a threat." Her eyes widened, but she nodded, leading us to the study. The room was as we had left it, its air heavy with the scent of leather and cigar smoke. Holmes moved to the bookshelves, his fingers tracing the spines as he searched for hidden compartments. I examined the desk, its surface cluttered with papers and a silver inkstand. Beneath a stack of parliamentary reports, I found a small, locked diary, its cover embossed with the Grayson crest. "Holmes," I said, holding it up, "this may hold something." He took the diary, his lockpicks making short work of the clasp. Inside were personal entries written in Sir Reginald's precise hand, dating back years. Holmes flipped to 1865, his eyes scanning the pages. "Here," he said, his voice sharp with discovery. "Listen, Watson. March 12th, 1865, Miss Clara Fielding, governess, dismissed after improper conduct with a guest. Father hushed it up, but the shame lingers. She left for America, or so I was told. I fear the truth may yet surface." I leaned closer, the firelight casting shadows on the page. Clara Fielding. Could she have returned, seeking revenge? Holmes shook his head. "Doubtful. But someone knew of this scandal and used it to extort Sir Reginald. The payments to SC suggest Crane as the blackmailer, but the involvement of Haverford and Ashby points to a larger scheme. Look here, a later entry. October 1888. The demands grow heavier. I cannot continue. Ashby's shadow looms and Haverford's spite festers. I must confront them or be ruined." Mrs. Grayson gasped, her hand flying to her locket. Reginald knew his enemies. Why did he not go to the police? Holmes's expression was grim. "Because, Mrs. Grayson, the scandal would have destroyed his career. A public figure cannot withstand such a stain, even one from decades past. He chose to pay, then to resist, and that resistance led to his death." We continued our search, Holmes uncovering a hidden panel behind a bookshelf. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Most were mundane, but one dated a month prior caught his eye. It was written on fine paper bearing the lion's head watermark and read, "The payments must continue or the truth of 65 will be known. Meet me at the bridge midnight, November 10th. The signature was a single initial, A. "Ashby," I said, my pulse quickening. This confirms his role. Holmes's brow furrowed. Perhaps, but the hand is not Ashby's. I've seen his writing in parliamentary records. This is a forgery or another player using his initial. The watermark ties it to Harrington and Sons, where Haverford also procures his stationery. The net tightens, Watson, but the true motive remains hidden. We left the study, the diary and letter added to our growing collection of clues. Mrs. Grayson promised to remain vigilant, locking the house and admitting no strangers. As we stepped into the foggy street, the gas lamps cast eerie halos and the distant toll of a church bell added a mournful note. The cab ride back to Baker Street was silent. Holmes lost in thought, his fingers drumming on the ledger. Back in our lodgings, the fire's warmth was a balm against the evening's chill. Holmes spread the clues on his desk: the cigarette case, the glove, the scrap of paper, the ledger, the diary, and the letter. "The motive is clear," he said, lighting his pipe. Sir Reginald was blackmailed over the 1865 scandal, likely involving Clara Fielding's disgrace. When he refused further payments, his enemies, Crane, Haverford, and possibly Ashby, struck. But the glove and the initials J.H. are misdirection meant to implicate Haverford alone. I nodded, my mind racing. Ashby's ambition makes him the likely mastermind. He stood to gain by removing Sir Reginald, his political rival. But Crane's violence and Haverford's grudge suggest they were complicit. Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes narrowing. Ashby's role is probable, but the forged letter suggests another hand. Someone wishes us to believe Ashby is the puppeteer while Haverford takes the blame. We need more evidence, Watson. Tomorrow we visit Poole and Coers to confirm the glove's owner, and we must trace Clara Fielding's fate. If she lives, she may hold answers. I set down my notebook, the complexity of the case daunting. And the ledger? Should we confront Crane or Haverford with it? Holmes's smile was sharp. Not yet. We shall lay a trap, using the ledger as bait. If our enemies believe it is still hidden, they will reveal themselves. But we must act swiftly. Mrs. Grayson's safety hangs in the balance. The fire crackled, casting long shadows, and the fog pressed against the windows, muffling the sounds of London. I felt the familiar thrill of the chase, tempered by the danger closing in. The scandal of '65, the forged letter, the planted glove, all were pieces of a puzzle, but the true motive was now clear. Blackmail, driven by greed and ambition, had led to murder. Yet the mastermind remained elusive, hidden behind a veil of misdirection. Holmes rose, his silhouette stark against the firelight. This case tests us, Watson, but the truth is within reach. The hidden motive is no longer hidden, it is blackmail, rooted in a past sin. We shall unravel the rest, or I am not Sherlock Holmes. As the clock struck 9, I felt the weight of the mystery settle over me. The shadow of the Thames had revealed its players, but the game was far from over. Holmes's relentless logic would guide us, but the danger was closer than ever, lurking in the fog beyond our door. Chapter 8. The trap is set. The evening shadows deepened over London, the fog weaving its relentless spell as Sherlock Holmes and I prepared to spring a trap that would, we hoped, ensnare the conspirators behind Sir Reginald Grayson's murder. The ledger, with its damning record of payments to S.C. and the cryptic reference to the scandal of 1865, had revealed blackmail as the motive. The forged letter with the lion's head watermark, the monogrammed glove, and the whispered names of Julian Haverford, Silas Crane, and Lord Ashby formed a web of deceit, but the mastermind remained elusive. Back at 221B Baker Street, the fire's warm glow contrasted with the chill of the task ahead, and Holmes's mind was a furnace of calculation. "Watson," Holmes said, pacing before the hearth, his pipe unlit in his hand, "we have the ledger, the letter, and the glove, clues that point to Haverford, Crane, and Ashby. But the misdirection is deliberate. To catch our quarry, we must turn their own game against them. We shall spread word that the ledger has been found and is in my possession, but not yet deciphered. This will draw them out. I set down my tea, my pulse quickening. A dangerous gambit, Holmes. If Crane is as violent as he seems, or Ashby as cunning, they'll come armed. Holmes's smile was sharp, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase. Precisely, Watson. Danger is the crucible in which truth is forged. We shall arrange a rendezvous in a place of our choosing, a warehouse by the Thames where we overheard their plotting. You, I, and a few trusted allies from Scotland Yard will be ready. I nodded, checking my revolver, its weight a familiar comfort. And Mrs. Grayson? She's at risk if they suspect her involvement. Holmes paused, his expression darkening. I have sent word to her to remain indoors with a constable posted discreetly nearby. But our focus must be the trap. If we succeed, her safety will be assured. Holmes dispatched a message to Inspector Lestrade, outlining the plan with his usual precision. He then turned to his network of informants, the irregulars, those street urchins who served as his eyes and ears in London's underbelly. Wiggins, he called to the leader of the group, a sharp-eyed lad who appeared at our door within the hour. Spread word among the docks that Sherlock Holmes has found Sir Reginald's ledger and will examine it tonight at the old warehouse in Wapping near the Black Anchor Tavern. Be subtle, but ensure the rumor reaches the right ears. Wiggins grinned, his cap askew. Right, Mr. Holmes. It'll be all over Wapping by dusk. He darted off, vanishing into the fog like a wraith. As night fell, we prepared for the confrontation. Holmes donned a dark cloak, his face partially obscured by a scarf, while I wore a plain overcoat, my revolver tucked close. The cab ride to Wapping was silent, the fog thickening until the gas lamps were mere pinpricks of light. The Thames lapped nearby, its rhythm a somber counterpoint to the clatter of our cab's wheels. The warehouse loomed ahead, its broken windows and sagging roof a stark contrast to the cozy warmth of 221B. The air was heavy with the scent of tar and decay, and the distant moan of a foghorn added an eerie note. We entered the warehouse, its interior a cavern of shadows lit only by a single lantern Holmes had hung from a beam. Crates and barrels littered the floor, their shapes looming like specters. Lestrade and two constables, grim-faced and armed, took positions behind a stack of crates, their presence hidden but reassuring. Holmes placed the ledger on a rickety table, its leather cover catching the lantern's feeble glow. A deliberate lure for our quarry. Watson, Holmes whispered, his voice barely audible. Take cover here. When they arrive, let me speak first. Your revolver may be needed, but only as a last resort. I crouched behind a barrel, my heart pounding as the minutes ticked by. The warehouse was silent save for the creak of timbers and the soft lapping of the Thames outside. Then a faint scuffle of footsteps echoed and two figures emerged from the shadows. Silas Crane, his scarred face unmistakable in the lantern light, and a burly man with a sailor's gait, his face obscured by a cap. Julian Haverford was conspicuously absent. Crane's eyes narrowed as he spotted the ledger. Holmes, he growled, his voice thick with menace, you've been meddling where you don't belong. Hand over that ledger and maybe you walk out of here. Holmes stood by the table, his posture relaxed but alert. Mr. Crane, he said, his tone cool. I expected more subtlety from a man of your reputation. The ledger contains evidence of your blackmail scheme, does it not? Payments from Sir Reginald Grayson to keep silent about a scandal from 1865. Crane's scar twitched, his hand hovering near his coat pocket. You know too much, Holmes. That ledger's my insurance. Give it over, or my friend here makes things messy. The burly man stepped forward, a knife glinting in his hand. I tightened my grip on my revolver, ready to act, but Holmes raised a hand, his voice steady. Before you act rashly, consider this. The ledger is not the only evidence. I have traced the Lion's Head watermark to Harrington and Sons, where Julian Haverford procures his stationery. And I know of Lord Ashby's involvement. Your conspiracy is unraveling, Crane. The burly man lunged, his knife flashing, but Holmes was faster, sidestepping with the grace of a fencer. In an instant, he seized the man's wrist, twisting it until the knife clattered to the floor. I sprang from my hiding place, revolver trained on Crane, who froze, his eyes darting to the shadows where Lestrade and the constables emerged, their truncheons at the ready. "Enough!" Lestrade barked, advancing. "Silas Crane, you're under arrest for conspiracy and suspicion of murder." Crane snarled, his hand reaching for his pocket, but Holmes was upon him, pinning his arm with surprising strength. "You'll find no escape, Crane," Holmes said. "But tell me, where is Haverford, and what of Ashby?" The burly man, now subdued by the constables, spat on the floor. "Haverford's run off, scared, witless. Ashby's the one pulling the strings. He paid us to do the job on the bridge." Crane shot his companion a venomous look but said nothing, his silence damning. Lestrade cuffed them both, and the constables led them away, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous warehouse. Holmes retrieved the ledger, his expression thoughtful as he examined the scattered papers that had fallen in the scuffle. "Watson," he said, holding up a crumpled note. This was in Crane's pocket, another piece of the puzzle. The note, written in a hurried hand, read, "The ledger must be destroyed. Meet at the bridge, midnight. A." I frowned, the pieces falling into place. Ashby again. But why meet at the bridge if the murder was already done? Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Because, Watson, the bridge is more than a crime scene. It is a symbol. Ashby chose it to send a message, perhaps to others who might defy him. But Crane's capture is a blow to his plans. We must find Haverford and confront Ashby before they regroup." We returned to Baker Street, the fog thicker now, muffling the city's sounds. The warmth of 221B was a balm, and Mrs. Hudson greeted us with a tray of tea and sandwiches, her concern evident. Holmes spread the new note beside the ledger, the glove, and the forged letter, his mind racing. "The trap has sprung," he said, lighting his pipe. "But the game is not over. Crane is in custody, but Haverford is at large, and Ashby remains untouched. The note confirms Ashby's role, but its handwriting matches the forged letter, suggesting a third party, a scribe, perhaps, or a confederate. We must trace Clara Fielding, the governess, to understand the scandal's full weight." I set down my sandwich, my appetite dulled by the night's events. "And Mrs. Grayson?" Crane's threat against her was clear. Holmes nodded. "I shall ensure Lestrade doubles her guard. Tomorrow we pursue Haverford and confront Ashby. The bridge awaits us again, Watson, for the final act." The fire crackled, casting long shadows, and the fog pressed against the windows, a silent witness to our resolve. The trap had been set, and though we had caught one player, the mastermind remained in the shadows, his motives cloaked in deception. Chapter 9. Confrontation at midnight. The fog over London had thickened to a smothering veil as midnight approached, casting Westminster Bridge in an eerie, gaslit glow. The success of our trap at the Wapping warehouse, where Silas Crane and his accomplice were apprehended, had tightened the noose around the conspirators behind Sir Reginald Grayson's murder. Yet Julian Haverford remained at large, and Lord Ashby, the likely mastermind, had yet to be confronted. The ledger, the forged letter with the Lion's Head watermark, the monogrammed glove, and the whispered scandal of 1865 had brought us to this moment, a final showdown on the very bridge where the crime began. The cozy warmth of 221B Baker Street seemed a distant memory as Sherlock Holmes and I prepared for the night's perilous climax. Holmes stood by the fire before we departed, his greatcoat draped over his shoulders, his eyes blazing with the intensity of the hunt. "Watson," he said, checking his revolver with a practiced hand, "Crane's capture has rattled our adversaries. Haverford is desperate, and Ashby will not sit idly by. The note we found, the ledger must be destroyed. Meet at the bridge midnight. A is our opportunity. They believe the ledger is still a threat, and we shall use that to draw them out." I adjusted my own revolver, its weight a steadying presence. "A dangerous plan, Holmes. Ashby is cunning, and Haverford may be armed. Are you certain Lestrade's men will be enough?" Holmes's smile was sharp. "Lestrade has positioned constables in the shadows, and the irregulars are watching the approaches. The bridge is our stage, Watson, and tonight the curtain falls." We left Baker Street, the fog swallowing the clatter of our hansom cab as we made for Westminster. The air was heavy with the scent of river mud and coal smoke, and the distant toll of Big Ben marked the hour as we reached the bridge. Its stone arches loomed through the mist, the gas lamps casting flickering pools of light that barely pierced the gloom. The Thames lapped softly below, its dark waters a silent witness to the drama about to unfold. Holmes led us to the center of the bridge, where the bloodstain from Sir Reginald's murder had long since been washed away by rain and tide. He placed a decoy ledger, a carefully crafted replica, on the parapet, its leather cover catching the gaslight. "Our bait," he murmured. "Now, we wait." We took cover behind a stone pillar, the cold seeping through my coat as I gripped my revolver. The fog muffled all sound save for the occasional creak of a passing barge and the soft tread of a lone pedestrian. My heart pounded, the tension building with each passing minute. Then a shadow moved in the mist, a tall, lean figure in a dark cloak, his face obscured by a hat pulled low. Julian Haverford. He approached the ledger, his movements cautious but hurried. As he reached for it, Holmes stepped forward, his voice cutting through the fog. "Mr. Haverford, your flight ends here. The ledger is a trap, and your confederates are in custody." Haverford froze, his hand hovering over the decoy. "Holmes," he spat, his voice thick with desperation. "You meddling fool, you've no proof against me." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "On the contrary, the ledger, the letter with the lion's head watermark, the glove monogrammed J.H. all point to your involvement in Sir Reginald's murder. You conspired with Silas Crane, and your master, Lord Ashby, orchestrated the blackmail." Haverford's face twisted, his hand darting to his pocket. I raised my revolver, but before he could act, another figure emerged from the fog. Lord Ashby, his aristocratic features stark in the gaslight, a pistol in his hand. "Enough, Haverford," he said, his voice cold. "You've bungled this from the start." Holmes remained unfazed, his revolver steady. "Lord Ashby, your presence confirms my deductions. You used the scandal of 1865 to blackmail Sir Reginald, and when he refused further payments, you ordered his death on this very bridge." Ashby's smile was thin, his eyes calculating. "A bold claim, Holmes, but you've no evidence that will hold in court. The ledger is destroyed, Crane is silenced, and Haverford will take the fall." Haverford whirled on Ashby, his face contorted with rage. "You traitor! You promised me the estate, said we'd ruin Grayson together." Holmes seized the moment, his voice calm but commanding. "Your discord betrays you both. The ledger is safe, Ashby, and Crane has confessed to his role as your enforcer. The letter, forged in your name but written by another, ties you to Harrington and Sons stationery. And the glove, monogrammed to implicate Haverford, was crafted by your tailor, Poole & Co. The game is over." Ashby's pistol wavered, his composure cracking. "You're clever, Holmes, but not clever enough." He raised the weapon, but before he could fire, a whistle pierced the fog. Lestrade and his constables surged from the shadows, their lanterns casting stark beams through the mist. Haverford lunged for the ledger only to find it a decoy, and in his panic he stumbled against the parapet. I acted on instinct, tackling Haverford to the ground, my revolver pressed to his back. "Stay down!" I shouted as the constables closed in. Ashby fired wildly, the shot echoing over the Thames, but Holmes was faster, disarming him with a swift blow to the wrist. The pistol clattered to the cobblestones, and Lestrade's men seized Ashby, cuffing his hands as he cursed. "Lord Ashby," Holmes said, his voice icy, "your ambition has undone you. The scandal of 1865 was your leverage, but murder was your downfall. You hired Crane to kill Sir Reginald, used Haverford's grudge to mask your involvement, and planted false clues to mislead us. But truth, like the Thames, finds its way." Ashby's eyes burned with defiance, but he said nothing as the constables led him away. Haverford, still pinned beneath me, muttered, "It was Ashby's plan. He knew about the governess, used it to bleed Grayson dry. When Grayson stopped paying, Ashby ordered the hit." Lestrade approached, his face grim but satisfied. "Well done, Holmes. We've got them both, and Crane's singing like a canary. The courts will have a field day with this lot." Holmes nodded, retrieving the decoy ledger. "Ensure Mrs. Grayson's safety, Lestrade. She must be protected until the trial. And search Ashby's residence for any further correspondence with the Lion's Head watermark." As the constables escorted Haverford and Ashby to a waiting police wagon, the fog seemed to lift slightly, the gas lamps casting a clearer light over the bridge. The Thames flowed on, its dark waters indifferent to the drama above. Holmes stood by the parapet, his silhouette stark against the mist, his expression one of quiet triumph. "Watson," he said, turning to me, "the confrontation is won, but the story is not yet complete. The scandal of 1865, Clara Fielding's disgrace, must be clarified. And there is the matter of the forged letter. A third hand wrote it, someone close to Ashby. We shall unravel these threads back at Baker Street." We returned to our cab, the chill of the night seeping into my bones. The confrontation had been swift and decisive, but the weight of the case lingered. Ashby's cunning, Haverford's desperation, and Crane's violence had been exposed, but the full truth of the scandal and the mysterious scribe remained elusive. Back at 221B, the fire's warmth was a balm, and Mrs. Hudson greeted us with a tray of tea and biscuits, her concern evident. Holmes spread the clues on his desk, the ledger, the glove, the forged letter, and the note from Crane's pocket. "The trap was a success," he said, lighting his pipe. "But the forged letter troubles me. Its handwriting does not match Ashby's or Haverford's. A secretary, perhaps, or a confederate we have yet to uncover." I sat by the fire, my notebook open. And Clara Fielding? Could she be alive, pulling strings from the shadows? Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes distant. "Possible, but unlikely. The scandal was a tool, not her doing. Tomorrow we trace her fate through old records. For now, we have struck a blow against our enemies. Ashby's ambition led him to murder, but his arrogance led him to us." The fire crackled, casting long shadows, and the fog pressed against the windows, a silent reminder of the city's secrets. The confrontation on the bridge had brought justice closer, but the final deduction awaited, and I knew Holmes would not rest until every thread was tied. Chapter 10. The Final Deduction. The fog that had cloaked London for days began to lift as the morning sun cast a pale glow over Baker Street, illuminating the familiar windows of 221B with a tentative warmth. The dramatic confrontation on Westminster Bridge the previous night had seen Lord Ashby and Julian Haverford apprehended. Their roles in Sir Reginald Grayson's murder exposed by Sherlock Holmes's relentless pursuit of truth. Silas Crane, the scarred smuggler, was already in custody, his confession corroborating the web of blackmail and murder woven around the scandal of 1865. Yet as I sat by the fire, the cozy crackle of the hearth a stark contrast to the chill of the case, I knew Holmes would not rest until every thread was unraveled. The ledger, the forged letter, the monogrammed glove, and the mysterious governess, Clara Fielding, demanded a final reckoning. Holmes lounged in his armchair, his violin resting on his knee, its strings silent as he puffed on his pipe, sending curls of smoke toward the ceiling. The desk before him was a tableau of evidence. The blood-stained cigarette case, the glove marked J.H., the ledger with its damning entries, the forged letter with the lion's head watermark, and the note from Crane's pocket signed A. Mrs. Eleanor Grayson was due to arrive, eager for answers, and I felt the weight of her grief mingling with the anticipation of Holmes's final deduction. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice calm but vibrant with purpose, "the case is nearly closed, but the details must be clarified for Mrs. Grayson and for posterity. The scandal of '65, the role of the scribe, and the moral lesson of this affair require our attention. Prepare your notebook. We shall lay bare the truth." I opened my notebook, my pen poised as the door knocker sounded. Mrs. Hudson ushered in Mrs. Grayson, her mourning dress as somber as ever, though her eyes held a flicker of hope. She clutched her locket, the portrait of her brother a silent presence. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice steady despite her evident strain. "I heard of the arrests. Is it true? Have you found Reginald's killer?" Holmes gestured to the armchair opposite his own. "Please, Mrs. Grayson, be seated. The truth is ours, and I shall explain all. The fire is warm, and Mrs. Hudson's tea is forthcoming. Let us unravel the mystery of your brother's death." Mrs. Hudson brought a tray of tea and biscuits, her quiet efficiency a comfort as we settled in. Holmes leaned forward, his sharp gray eyes fixed on Mrs. Grayson. "Your brother, Sir Reginald Grayson, was murdered on Westminster Bridge by a conspiracy driven by blackmail and ambition. The evidence, gathered through diligent inquiry, points to Lord Ashby as the mastermind, with Julian Haverford and Silas Crane as his tools. Allow me to elucidate." He began with the scene of the crime, his voice measured but compelling. The bloodstain beneath the bridge showed irregularities, streaks indicating the body was moved after the fatal stab to the heart. This suggested a deliberate attempt to obscure the true location of the attack, perhaps to confuse the timeline or conceal evidence. The cigarette case, dented and bloodstained, was found by the riverbank, not on Sir Reginald's person, indicating it was removed, likely because it held a clue or was dislodged in a struggle. Mrs. Grayson's hand tightened on her locket. The case was his. He always carried it. Holmes nodded. Indeed, its presence by the riverbank was a mistake by the killer, who underestimated the tide's failure to carry it away. Next, the scrap of paper with the initials J.H. found near the body was a deliberate plant, meant to implicate your cousin Julian Haverford. The glove we found in Hyde Park, also marked J.H., was crafted by Lord Ashby's tailor, Poole & Co., a further attempt to shift blame. I interjected, my pen pausing. "But why such elaborate misdirection, Holmes?" He smiled faintly. "To protect the true culprit, Watson. Lord Ashby, a political rival, sought to eliminate Sir Reginald, whose reforms threatened his ambitions. The glove and initials were designed to make Haverford the scapegoat, a man whose grudge against Sir Reginald was well known." Holmes turned to the ledger, opening it to the entries marked SC. "This ledger, hidden in your brother's study, records payments to Silas Crane, a smuggler known for his violence. The payments, totaling thousands of pounds, were to silence a scandal from 1865 involving a governess, Clara Fielding. Your brother's diary confirmed her dismissal after improper conduct, a matter hushed up by your father but later exploited." Mrs. Grayson's eyes widened. Clara, I remember her. A kind woman, but she left suddenly. Reginald never spoke of it. Holmes's expression softened. The scandal was a stain on your brother's reputation, one he paid dearly to conceal. When he refused further payments 3 weeks ago, as noted in the ledger, his enemies acted. The letter you saw him burn, bearing a lion's head watermark, was a summons to the bridge forged to implicate Ashby but written by another hand. A scribe, likely in Ashby's employ, whose identity we have yet to confirm. He held up the note from Crane's pocket. This, found during our trap at the warehouse, confirms Ashby's orders to destroy the ledger. Crane was the blade, Haverford the pawn, and Ashby the architect. Their confrontation on the bridge last night sealed their guilt. Haverford admitted Ashby's plan, and Crane's confession corroborates it. Mrs. Grayson's voice trembled. But why the bridge? Why such a public place? Holmes leaned back, his pipe glowing. The bridge was a statement, Mrs. Grayson. Ashby chose it to send a message to others who might defy him. A public execution masked as a mystery. The absence of a weapon and witnesses was no accident. Crane's precision ensured a clean kill, and the fog was their ally. I set down my pen, the pieces falling into place. And the scandal? Was Clara Fielding merely a victim, or did she play a role? Holmes's eyes narrowed. My inquiries conducted this morning traced Miss Fielding to America, where she died in 1875, a broken woman. She was no conspirator, merely a pawn in a game of greed. Ashby learned of the scandal through political circles, likely from Haverford, who harbored resentment over the family estate. Together they used Crane to extort Sir Reginald, and when he resisted, to kill him. Mrs. Grayson's tears fell silently, her locket pressed to her heart. Reginald was a good man. He deserved better. Holmes's voice was gentle but firm. He did, and justice is served. Ashby, Haverford, and Crane will face trial, their crimes laid bare. The ledger, the letter, and their own confessions ensure it. But there is a lesson here, Mrs. Grayson, one worth reflecting upon. Ambition and greed can corrupt even the noblest hearts, but truth, pursued with relentless logic, restores balance. She nodded, her composure returning. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. You have given me closure, though the pain remains. Holmes rose, his silhouette stark against the firelight. Your brother's memory is honored by the truth. Return home, Mrs. Grayson, and rest. The law will handle the rest. She left, her steps lighter despite her grief, and I felt a profound respect for Holmes's ability to bring clarity to chaos. As the door closed, he took up his violin, its mournful notes filling the room, mingling with the crackle of the fire and the faint hum of London beyond the windows. Watson, he said, pausing his playing. The case is closed, but one detail nags. The scribe who forged the letter. A minor player, perhaps, but their hand betrays a deeper network. I shall pursue it quietly, lest it unravel another thread. I smiled, accustomed to his insatiable curiosity. You'll not rest, will you, Holmes? His eyes twinkled. Rest is for the ordinary, Watson. The mind craves puzzles, and London never lacks for them. As the violin resumed its melody, weaving through the cozy glow of 221B, I reflected on the case. The blood on the bridge, the tangled web of blackmail, the confrontation in the fog, all had been resolved by Holmes's genius. Yet the moral lesson lingered. Power corrupts, but truth endures. I closed my notebook, content to let the violin's notes carry us into the quiet of the morning. The fog outside no match for the clarity within.